Oh man, that's a tough question. I mean, there's so many things that I can say, but I think for me, like my the thing that brings me joy the most in life is just serving others. And that's any capacity, as a coach, as a person, as a kid, like whatever. I always want to serve others as much and as well as I can. I think that for me, I really believe, and I know it sounds counterintuitive to what I've said so far, but I do really believe you kind of have to enjoy where you're at. Having that mentality, I've got my goals and I've got things that I want to do, but the reality is, like, I'm good with where I'm at, and I'm always good with where I'm at.
Hello and welcome to the Reflective Coach podcast with me, Coach Luca. I hope you've been enjoying the content as of recently, and I hope you've enjoyed the October 2023 reflection and recap point with the coaches who featured on the podcast from October. There are so many points, so many areas, so many considerations within these episodes that it was really great to produce another one and give you that reflection and recap point where there is so much content which enabled over an hour of information and sharing to really share with yourselves and continue that learning journey. Now, I've gone back, I've listened to the episodes, I've added to the notes, and my gosh, my notebook is growing and growing. It's great to share so much content with you, especially as a community, as the coaching world, as a professional world, whether you're working in teaching, youth work, or other areas that work with individuals. But I hope to share these components with you from a wide array of professionals within their areas and governing bodies that can really help develop your practice and your work whilst you're out there in the professional working world. It's great because so many individuals who come on, I'm able to take so much away from them, and I'm able to learn from them within the processes as well. However, in this episode, I'm delighted to welcome Coach Katie Smith. It's great to speak to Katie because her energy, her motivation, her desire and her passion reminded me so much of myself when I was her age and the real ambitious levels that I really wanted to achieve. Now, I hope she maintains these levels and I hope she continues to take them away, because you could really feel it over the course of the podcast call, over the microphone, over the web chat that we had. And even though she was in another country, the radiation of that motivation and energy is something that she can really take away in her personal attributes. However, in this episode, we talk about the higher purpose, constraints-based coaching and language. There is so much within this because we talk about coaching constraints, language, leadership, and I love this quote: leadership has a price. Pushing people to new levels is obviously a big consideration within that, and sometimes there are a lot of considerations. Just then, as I was thinking about a scenario, a potential one, I was thinking about an opportunity that could arise, and someone being in that leadership position and a position being presented to them whereby they have to make the final decision, but they have to be autonomous enough to let their staff around them within that senior leadership role have the ability to make those decisions, to bring new practices into play, to develop the organisation, to allow them to perform in their roles whilst not having a control over absolutely everything, and therefore having more of a willingness, a desire, more of a collaboration, and more of a connected community between that leadership style that rings right throughout and creates a sense of purpose within the organisation that allows others to collaborate, and therefore you become more of a purposeful organisation. But that's a key consideration there, that leadership, those levels, and sometimes leadership has a price. We talked about purpose and finding it in life, and again, this is something that has been coming up recently and something that has featured on Morgan Philippa's episode, about being young, about where we're going, about trying to enjoy the here and now, but trying to maximise it whilst having that outlook towards the future, having that adaptability, and taking in consideration the amount of areas that we could delve and drop into. Again, controlling the controllables, this is something which continuously comes up, and something that comes up when I speak to a lot of American-based coaches or those who are based out in the US, in terms of that continuous language that comes across and what are the controllables, how and what. We then interlink with realistic goals and expectations, We talked about impact. We then spoke about the ability to play different sports and Katie's background in her actual favourite sport being basketball, but now she's a full-time coach within soccer. And I believe since the last time we spoke, she's actually had a new role, and she does have a great outlook on the future and where she wants to go, and hopefully she maintains those motivation levels. But basketball is her favourite sport, and she talks about belief, accomplishment, and confidence. We talk about goals and being selfish, the impact on others and how. Where does this come from in terms of that drive, that energy, that motivation, that confidence, that accomplishment that she wants to try and achieve? We talk about success, being the best, and how that comes across. And again, that leadership pays a price. So if you want to be the best, does that pay a price within itself? And do you have to be selfish at times, or is that the only way you can be to become successful? We talk about what players remember, how we can help them and maintain opportunities for them to become better within themselves, whilst working to work on ourselves to continuously improve and meet the standards that we want. We talk about meeting players where they are at, and again, this is something which has come up recently, and I believe this was Marissa Kresk who actually shared this insight about meeting players where they're at. And it also interlinks with Jake Nannon in terms of having the being a master and not a master of everything. Because if you're a master of all, you're a master of nothing. And that is because you're not focusing on one area. And therefore, if you can focus on one area and look at the long term, and you're able to have those levels where you can achieve one thing, move on, achieve the next, you're actually going to achieve a lot more than trying to have an all-rounded achieve everything within one go. So it's about meeting the players where they're at. We talked about job as a coach, standards and accountability, how Katie then instills these standards and accountability with her in her own coaching practice, how she maintains that on herself. We talked about tone and reflection, impacts on players, and being the most influential player on the team. My gosh, there is so much within this episode, and I love how each episode interlinks with each other because there are links between every episode. Now, this is a longer introduction than usual, but there is so much to really share with yourselves, especially on this content-based avenue that we're at. And I hope that you're taking so much away and you're adding to your journal. Because as said, I'm going back and listening to episodes, I'm adding to my notes, and there is so much whereby I've missed the first time, or I've had the opportunity to listen back and add on top of the notes with my own thoughts and interlink with previous episodes. So continue to add to your journal, continue to add to your log. There is so much within each episode, and I love sharing the content with you that you can really take it away week after week. I loved listening to Katie on other podcasts before she came on mine, and it was great to hear the similar messages that she has shared, but to try and just squeeze a little bit more out of her that wasn't on other podcasts, and I believe that is something that I've done. However, this is the Reflective Coach podcast on YouTube, Spotify, LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok, and Flickr. If you drop a like, drop a follow, drop a subscribe, and leave a comment, especially on YouTube, Spotify, LinkedIn, and Twitter, it does really help the podcast. As you can see on screen, I'm Anthony_Luca96. It's at TRC Podcast _ on Twitter. It is the Reflective Coach Podcast everywhere else. Every time you drop a like and subscribe, it does really help the podcast itself. So it's a big thank you from me, and I hope you enjoy this episode. This is Coach Luca with Katie Smith on the Reflective Coach Podcast. Thank you.
I think that when you put yourself in places and you really go and work towards your goals, like things just kind of tend to work out. So that's where I've been at now. And then alongside all those coaching roles, I've also done a lot of education too. So I'm 24 now, but my resume, just in terms of education experience, is pretty well beyond, I would say, what you would assume for a 24-year-old. And so I'll be in the mood to start working. So
get yourself in the mindset and geared up to get back into the swing of doing some assignments.
Exactly. There you go.
I've got one assignment. It's due in August, and as much as it was set a couple of weeks ago, it was like, yeah, it's ages away. I'm like, literally, it's 2 weeks away. My lecturer goes away in a couple of weeks, so I got to get a draft in, and I'm like, yeah, end of school term's nearing because I teach as well. I'm like, I got lots of podcasting on, but I really need to get in the mindset of doing my last assignment for this year.
It's tough. It really is. And I'm somebody that, like, when I have a ton of time, I don't get it done because I'm like, I'll just do it later. So I really perform better when it's like it's due today and I have no other option, you know? So that's where I'm at right now.
And that's what I usually tend to do. It's always sort of like the weekend just before the deadline or very near. And that's because I've done all the reading and preparation beforehand. And I'm like, right, I've got this time frame, I've got this constraint. And now I'm going to push myself to it to read over it and then get it all done. And it's worked well for me so far. Sometimes I've kicked myself in the foot, but I've done all right. I've not pushed myself to some of the limits of some of the other classmates who have got on literally like 11:58, a minute before the closing deadline.
Right.
So, what's your degree and what you studying?
So I'm studying my master's in soccer coaching education through Ohio University. So it's all online, but I just started about 2 months ago, just finished my first set of classes last week. And so now I'm on the next two.
And how long's your master's course going to last?
So if all goes well, I should graduate next August. So a little over a year.
Quick turnaround then, and a very exciting time.
Yeah, so we're kind of trying to like speed the process along. So my advisor's like, you can take like 4 classes this summer and 4 in the fall. And I'm like, okay.
Intense, very intense.
Yes, it is. And it's a lot. And they're the way that they do classes too, it's like each class is only about a month and a half. So it's a ton of stuff to do, like all within a month and a half. So it's a lot, but I mean, it's worth it. I'd rather do it quicker and be done, right, than like drag it out. So
yeah, of course, absolutely. I've got a very close friend. She's currently studying a master's herself, and she's preparing for a dissertation, so she's getting a lot of participation and all the research for a supervisor to sign off, and very similar. And when we're chatting and we're talking about the research and the literature which she's reading and what she has to do, I'm like, wow, that is, an intense amount of time because it's something that I'm looking to do, but I'm not at that point yet. But it's great to sort of ask as many questions until I get to that point that I'm on. But very intense. But to take the amount of classes that you're doing, I think you must just show how knowledgeable and how academically smart you are and intelligent.
Either that or I'm just dumb. I don't know.
Taking a lot of things on at once.
Out so far, so
yeah, which is good, and if it pays off, then even better.
Right.
That's
why I said if all goes to plan, right? Because, I mean, hopefully I don't have to take longer, right? I don't want to have to take any of them twice, but we'll see.
And the one thing that you've probably learned from coaching so far is that not everything goes to plan, and sometimes as much as we plan and put the detail in, it can go out the window, and there's nothing wrong with that as well.
Yeah, 100%. Just gotta adjust, so we'll see. But I feel pretty good. I mean, my first 2 classes went well, so I finished both of them with A's. So I feel like that was a good sign for the future. So we'll see. But also, I literally have 2 assignments today that I haven't started yet. So I don't know. We'll see.
Well done for fitting a podcast in between as well. That is strong commitments, to be fair.
Oh, no, it's all good. It's, like I said, this will probably help me get in the mood to do it, so.
Great, and I hope that it does, and it can be beneficial. But whilst you've got this masters, and whilst you're doing that, and you're a coach at the State University of Arkansas.
Arkansas State. Yeah.
Arkansas. You also coach at a number of other places, that, from what I've heard on another podcast that I was listening to earlier today.
Yeah. So last year, or I guess this past school year, I coached at a ton of different places. So I had 2 club teams. I was an assistant coach at Collierville High School, which is in Tennessee. And then I was an assistant coach at Northwest Mississippi Community College. And then I also was the head coach for the middle school boys at Collierville Middle. And then I also last summer was at a USL2 men's team in Johnson City. So this past year, I got a lot of different experience in different realms of the game, men's, women's, girls, boys, different ages. That was a really good experience for me. So now going into this year, I'm looking to kind of narrow the focus. So for me, the end goal is I want to be the head coach at a Division I program. And so my goal has always been to get into Division I coaching. And so I kind of did all those different things that last year and then in the years prior to try and build my resume so that when I graduated college, I would have the opportunity to transition into Division I. So or so far it's going according to plan pretty well. So now I'll be starting there, and then I'm going to be working with a local club as well. And I'm not sure what capacity that's going to be in just yet, but I'll do something there. And so I'm kind of only going to be with two teams, which for me doesn't sound like a lot, but I'm sure being at the college level and that high of a college level, it's going to be a bit different as well. So I'm really looking forward to being able to kind of narrow in and really get to work with one or two groups rather than, six or seven. So
Absolutely, and it sounds great because obviously, as you said, you've got that wide experience working from the high school age across club and then working at college level, and working with the different age groups and genders as well. So that accumulation of experience, especially within a short space of time, then on the back end of graduating and that journey that you've had so far, currently on your masters, seems to be working out pretty well on where you're going, and certainly geared towards those goals which you want to achieve, and whether you have a time frame behind that is to be seen, and how you achieve it, and whether you have that delay or whether you choose to expand on a position that you're currently at to gain that experience. It's a very exciting time for you. And whilst you took on all those clubs and those commitments and everything that comes with that, obviously in your head there seems to be a formulation of how you were going about to achieving towards your goals. But when it came down to it, was it more of, oh, this sort of happened, this came together, and then boom, 6 clubs? Or was it more strategy, right, get this one on board, then that one, and then I can do this, and then you started to look at it? How did that sort of come into play and develop?
I think that, really for me, like it's a lot of hard work and then just a bit of luck. And really, I think that's what coaching is. I think you put in, and really anything, like you put in a lot of hard work and effort and you work towards your dreams, and like you're gonna catch lucky breaks. And that's kind of where I've been at. So I got offered a coaching job when I was 20 years old to take over a high school program. So I moved back home, started coaching there, and I was extremely successful there. And so through that, I got offered to coach the club, and then I was successful there. And so I kind of just like, I had success, and then people noticed, and then they offered me a job at a higher level. And so I kind of kept progressing that way. And then just getting into college, really, it was kind of luck for me. I was coaching, or I had been offered a coaching job at a new club, and I had started working there. And basically, one of the head coach at Northwest, he coached at the same club, and he kind of just called me one day and was like, hey, like, we need an assistant coach. Would you be interested? And I was like, yeah, like, absolutely. And so we went there and wound up having a really good year. We went to the national tournament. We had a lot of success. We were the coaching staff of the year for the region. So that was a big, big factor into me being able to take the next step, which once again kind of came with a lucky break. I had some things lined up, and I was planning on having to move like pretty far away. And essentially I went to play adult rec league soccer one night, where all great things happen. And I started talking to a girl, and she basically was just like, yeah, I know the head coach at Arkansas State, and I think that he might be willing to kind of help you out and like give you an opportunity. And so basically I was like, okay, give him my phone number. And a couple weeks later he reached out to me, and now I'm going there. So I think that when you put yourself in places and you really go and work towards your goals, like things just kind of tend to work out. So that's where I've been at now. And then alongside all those coaching roles, I've also done a lot of education too. So I'm 24 now, but my resume, just in terms of education experience, is pretty well beyond, I would say, what you would assume for a 24-year-old. And so I think that has also kind of helped me be able to get into this space. Obviously I caught a lucky break, but then if that guy would have seen my resume with like maybe one school on it, probably wouldn't have worked out. So I think it's kind of a little bit of both. And I've been really fortunate and lucky and blessed to kind of be where I'm at. And so I'm really thankful for all the people that took chances on me, because that's really the only way that I got here. So.
And it sounds great, and obviously, by taking chances, they found like a hidden gem as such, because everything that you're doing, as much as you might have said that you might have had one high school and you might not have taken that chance on you, realistically, everything that you're accumulating now and what you're doing just shows the resume isn't always the final product or what is on offer to show from a coach. And I completely believe in luck, and I believe everything happens for a reason, and there's a divine purpose behind things, and that's just part of my religious beliefs as well, which comes into play. But take that out of it. I believe in luck, and I believe that happens in life as well. And whilst you were chatting to someone because you were playing soccer that night and come across someone, or football, it also happened very similarly because you were previously a basketball coach as well, and that led to some conversations for you becoming an assistant coach. So where you said both of those situation scenarios, and without knowing no one and knowing no one, there is that sort of divine reason and that luck which has played into leading you to where you're at, and obviously it's all happening for a certain reason without planning it.
Yeah, 100%. And the basketball thing's funny too, because so I coached Little League in high school, and one of the kids that I coached, his mom was the head coach at a local high school. And so when I graduated, my dad actually went to her and was like, hey, would you let my daughter be, your assistant coach? Like, you don't have to pay her. I just want her to get some experience, because originally I was interested in coaching basketball. And so, because basketball is actually my favorite sport, I might get crucified for saying that. Maybe I shouldn't have said that, but it's true. So I came in and I wanted to coach basketball. And so she gave me a chance. And then just me being me, I'm 18 years old and I've been helping out at this school. And the athletic director comes up, and it's my first time meeting it. And I'm like, hey, I heard your soccer program's not very good. If you ever need a soccer coach that's going to do something, like, let me know. And I'm 18, and he's probably thinking, like, what is this girl on, right? But then 2 years later, their coach left. He offered me a spot, and I actually, fortunately was able to kind of put my money where my mouth is, because we were able to turn the program around. But, he kind of took a chance on me being a dumb 18-year-old coming up and saying something. And it's funny because he had a similar story. So he had gotten started into coaching the same way. He was 18. He went up to some random school and was just like, hey, I want to get into coaching. Like, will you let me have a spot? And they took a chance on him, and he got where he was. And he's like, so I'm going to take a chance on you. And luckily he did. And so I still talk to him every now and again, and we still keep up. And so I always tell him, like, you're the reason that I've gotten here, right? Because it all started with you. So he's a good dude. I'm really thankful for that. And like you said, it all kind of builds on each other. So that's how it goes, man. You just get lucky and you just go from there. So.
And that's an incredible story and an incredible journey in how to where you've landed, where you're at, and what you're doing now. And, it definitely defines your purpose as well, without you having to go, right, this is my purpose, or this is the definition of it in front of you. Because you can hear it in just by your storytelling and in your journey so far. And whilst basketball is your favourite sport, and you're at that perfect position where you can coach it, you're in it, you're in that environment, and, you have the pathway to continue within that. You've made that transition into soccer, and now what you're coaching at the club. So whilst walking away from that favourite sport, or taking the opportunity to move into another, why did you leave what maybe some people would go, right, this is perfect place for me?
Yeah, so when I got offered the job to coach soccer at that school, I was also able to stay on basketball, and I took more responsibility. So what wound up happening was I was just an assistant coach for their varsity team at the time. And then whenever they offered me the head coaching job for soccer, the coach that I had previously worked with for basketball also left. So they brought in a new head coach. And so through that, essentially that head coach I was the head coach of the JV team. This is all for the girls. So I was the head coach for the JV team. I was the head coach for the 5th and 6th grade girls team. And then I was still an assistant coach for the varsity girls team. So I actually took more roles there. And then I was also the head coach of the boys and girls soccer teams. So basically what wound up happening was I started coaching soccer, and I just realized I was a lot better at that. I love both. Like, I grew up playing both. Basketball is my favorite because I think it's a little more interesting, but I realized that I'm much better at coaching soccer than basketball. I wasn't awful, but I don't know. I just realized, I guess, that like the pathway for me would be soccer. And I kind of grew as a coach. I grew to love the game a lot more. I loved it as a player, but I think as a coach, I've really realized how intricate and how difficult it is to coach it well. And I think soccer, it's like so simple, but it's so difficult to coach. And so I think that's really something that intrigued me and made me want to stick with it. And then whenever I had the success I had, and I kind of recognized that, like, hey, I could really do something here, and I started getting offered other opportunities, I kind of knew at that point I would have to let basketball go, because I was like, I could stay at this school and I could coach both forever, or I could really go and do something with soccer and kind of see where I land. And so I just took a chance, and I was like, I guess I'll give it up. And so I left and I went to another high school, and I went to Northwest and all these places and started coaching. And then through that, like you said, I kind of realized like that was the purpose, right? And so for me, I would love to coach basketball, but I think that's going to be like a rec league type situation, maybe when I have a kid or something. But yeah, soccer is definitely like the long-term path. And so, it was, once I got in it, it was a pretty easy decision, because I just kind of knew,
And sometimes just knowing and taking maybe what you might find within yourself to go, right, this is the right opportunity. I've got the right feelings in front of me. I know this is going to happen. Sometimes just by following your heart, it can actually work out for the best. And, as I said, some people might have been in that perfect position, then to transition away. Some people might ask that question around why, but for you, when you truly know and make that, jump, and what might have been a risk as well, because you're in that perfect position where you could have coached both, you had that security, you could have kept growing, you could have gained that experience, you've got that sort of passive income if you're to stay there for 10 years as such, and then it becomes, routine. It's a perfect sort of scenario, because then you could get married, or then you could have kids, you could buy a house and so on. But then you've made that transition, you've made that jump, which is, quite scary as well. But whilst you've made that jump, and sometimes some people make a jump, and we don't have a time machine to go into the future, look at it, and have both perfect scenarios to go, right, I know I can't take this one or won't. But there is some sort of regret within that before you even jump in, and even though it's worked out really well for you at that time, that possible regret of, oh, why did I leave that for that, can come into play. But realistically, you've jumped into something knowing that you're still going to get a good experience, and you had the opportunity of football and basketball to land back upon, or to continue in either pathway, which is great as well. And whilst you say you might end up back in basketball, and that might be when you have a child yourself, if, say, soccer doesn't work out, you don't have that success which you might formulate within your mind, and you might end up saying, right, I've been doing this for 7 years, I haven't had that success, it's become a little bit sluggish now, maybe my energies and motivations weren't where they were 5 years ago. Would you consider then going, yeah, maybe I can have success in basketball now, I might transition back across? Is that something which could play into a factor maybe?
It's not really something I thought about. I think kind of and I mean, everybody says it, right? But when I made the jump, it was very much like I have faith in myself. Like I'm gonna make it happen. And I think that I'm somebody that's really driven by that faith in myself and belief in myself. And I really believe I can accomplish anything that I set my mind to, because I work hard, because I'm willing to put myself out there. So I don't think that I've really ever thought about that. However, I mean, it's definitely a potential, right? If something doesn't work out. I think the thing about coaching, and like you said, you kind of hit the nail on the head, like there's jobs where you have a lot of security, right? Like you can go to a high school, you can coach there for 10 or 15 years, and you can hang out, and you can get married, and you can have kids and have summers off, and it's great. And there were a lot of coaches that at the time told me, when I wanted to go into college, they told me, like, don't, like, you'll never have job security, you might not make it, here we get summers off, we get to hang out, we get, like you said, passive income, we're just we have the best life ever, right? Like we're 8 to 5, we go home, we can do whatever we want. College coaching, it's 24/7. And I think that's part of the risk you take. And like you said, I mean, it's a big risk. I'm 24. Like this is kind of, for me, it's like a life altering decision in a lot of ways, right? Because I've had boyfriends that this decision definitely affects that, right? Because it changes the way that you're able to kind of move through life. And so I think for me, it's all about what's your biggest goal, right? Like, what do you want to accomplish? Right now at 24, my biggest goal is to, be a head coach. And so for me, it's like, that's what drives every decision I make. And so if my goals were different, then maybe I would want a more comfortable job, or maybe I would want that security. But being that my goals are what they are, like, I'm going to go after it. I'm going to put 110% into it. And if it doesn't work out, I think if you start in college and it doesn't work out, it's easier to transition back into a safe job, right? So like if I started in college and it didn't work out for whatever reason, I could go find a local high school and get on there because I've got college experience and, whatever. And so I think when you have the opportunities to take those leaps forward, you got to take them, because they may never come again. And I think that's where, for me, it was like, I'm being told all this stuff like, oh, you don't need to do it, whatever. But it's like, well, if I don't do it now, I may never get that opportunity, right? So that's kind of where I'm at now. It's like I'm just trying to take the opportunities as they come. And then if something were to not work, or like you said, maybe a couple years from now, it's like, oh, I just don't want to be in this anymore, like the main goal changes or whatever, then you can always go back and you can, I don't want to say regress, because I think coaching at every level is important, but you can go back and kind of drop down a level easily, whereas getting up a level is more difficult. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you say there. Sometimes you got to jump into it and take it, because you never know
whether that might exist again, or it might go away and it might never present itself. And that is very key, and it's very similar to a conversation that I had yesterday with another interviewee. And I love that message because it emphasizes and it builds on from that naturally without us having a pre-conversation or you listen to that last episode. And I think that's absolutely true, because some things in life I'm like, right, I can have a strategy, I can overthink, I can analyze it, I can break it down into every detail. But unless I really go and jump into it and present myself or take this opportunity that has presented itself to me, unless I really jump into it, then I'm never going to find out whether that's actually going to work out for me. And only until then, you might learn from it and might go, do you know what, I might not jump at that point again, or if I do jump, then you do. And there's a great quote, and it's from his name's Oscar. He's an actor, and it's a little short you see, and he says, at the time that you I might get this wrong, but at the time when it's most scary to jump. And I absolutely love that little like TikTok clip, because I think it's absolutely true, because when it is most scary, that is the time that you do it. Take those risks, go on and see what happens for yourself, and if you don't do it, then you might not get to those high levels or that division one which you wanted to get to, because you have taken that risk to get there. And whilst you have those goals and that maybe selfishness, because some people will deem that as selfishness. We got our goals, we're driven, we might switch off other people, we got the late nights, we got the weekends, we might sacrifice partners, we might, miss out on life opportunities or events, and, we're geared towards coaching because that's that self-belief, that love, that innate passion, that purpose, and everything that comes into it. And some people just cannot understand or comprehend that level of sacrifice that goes into it. Is that something which is quite hard for you, or is that something that just comes natural and that you're always going to maintain in life, do you think?
I think it comes naturally for me. I think that just innately, I'm a leader, I'm a competitor, I want to be the best, and I've always been that way. I mean, I can't even play like Monopoly with my family because I just go freaking nuts if I lose. Like I just always am driven by, like you said, one, the higher purpose, right? Like I'm here to live my life. I'm a Christian. I'm here to live my life for God. My purpose is higher than myself, right? So even though like, yeah, my goals might seem selfish, the reason I coach isn't so that I can be, like the greatest coach ever. My reason is because I want to impact people, right? I want to impact the game, impact the community, impact the players. And I think that everything goes back to that, because I believe that my purpose is like how I can serve other people and what I can do for them. And so I think that through that, and with that being my purpose, like every decision that I make that revolves around coaching, it's all about my players. Like what's best for my players, right? I go and get this education. I go and maybe take the time to do a class, whatever. It's for the purpose of being better for them. And so I think that, like, yeah, there's obviously two sides to everything. Like, I'm sure in some ways, like, it seems selfish. And, if you are sacrificing, like you said, maybe family time or friends or whatever, like, it can come across that way. But I think the reality is, like, what's the purpose? Well, the purpose is to impact other people, right? So really, it's actually selflessness in the term of, I'm not going to go hang out with my friends tonight. Instead, I'm going to sit in my C license coaching course on Zoom for 2 hours because I want to be better for the people that I'm around every day that I'm impacting. And so I think, these things kind of they go together, and obviously you have to have a balance. But for me, like, I've always been someone that's very all or nothing. Like I either give 110% or absolutely nothing. And I'm that way in every aspect of life. If I like a TV show, I watch every episode in like, 5 hours, or I never watch a single show. Like I'm very all or nothing. And so for me with coaching, it plays right into that. Everything that I do centers around that. It's the most important thing outside of God in my life. And so I think that, like you said, I mean, it's easy to sacrifice when you have that purpose, right? And so I think for me, and I don't even look at it as a sacrifice. Like I'm not like, oh man, I really wish I could be doing this, but instead I have to coach. Like I love it. Like I would rather be doing this than anything else. So I think it's all about perspective. And like you said, it goes back to having a higher purpose in life and a higher purpose in coaching. But I love it. I mean, there are definitely things that I've missed out on, but I don't regret it for 2 seconds, and I would do it all over again if I had to. So
I love that, and it's something which I share in a lot of my beliefs and a lot of my thoughts, and just something that I was sort of reflecting upon in the car as I was driving earlier, naturally. That's where it comes from in terms of that purpose and that belief. And I absolutely believe, what is the point of living? And that's maybe mine, and maybe that religion that kicks in for me. But what is the point of living where when you get to the end of your life, if you haven't had a real impact or purpose, or you haven't, impacted others, or you're not going to be remembered for it. And it's not about legacy or trying to be remembered for the higher goal and going, oh, look at me, I'm on a quote quote billboard, etc. It's just literally being remembered by people. Oh, you're a good person. Or remember what Coach Luca done. Remember what Coach Katie done. Oh, look, I've learned this from him, and I'm giving this to my kids, and so on. And that's just that natural progression because of the impact and time that we spent with them, and we know what our purpose was. And I absolutely love what you say in terms of that higher purpose and where we're going. And whilst you do that in your day-to-day job and that you don't have that regret, you're glad that you do it, you love it. Say in the future a job does come along, it might be a director of coaching, it might be a director within a soccer at some level, but it might be very good pay, it might be good for your family at that point, you might have a great experience, but your direct impact in terms of on the kids or players or individuals that you might work with, might not be as significant as it is coaching and what you do day to day. So whilst, that job brings benefits and bonuses and, you're sort of moving away from a purpose as such, but would that come into a factor whereby, right, I definitely know my purpose isn't to do this, so therefore the answer's no? Or would it be something that you could consider in that sense then?
Yeah, so right now I had been interviewed for a director of coaching job at the local club in Jonesboro, and I don't know if I'm going to get that job or not. But one of the things that I thought about was exactly what you're saying. It was kind of like, okay, I want to coach, and as a director, like, can I still make that impact? But I think when you're a director, like, you're basically coaching other coaches, right? So maybe you're not the one necessarily on the field with the kids, but by coaching other coaches, helping them become better, holding them accountable, you are impacting the kids. And so I think that in any role within sports, whether you're the director, whether you're an athletic director, you are, a teacher for a coaching license or an educator, whatever you do, I think everyone in this community plays such a big part in what we provide to the kids, right? If you're an educator, if you are a director, if you are a coach, like every single one of us have a what's the word I'm looking for? We have oh my gosh, I'm going blank on this word. Hold on. Okay, let me phrase it a different way because I cannot think of the word I'm trying to think of. But, I got it. We have an obligation to our players and to our kids to play a role in making sure that everybody is the best that they can possibly be. And so I think that for me, like, I could totally see myself being a director and being in that leadership capacity because it still impacts the players, even if it's indirectly. And honestly, in that role, you can almost argue you're impacting more players, right? Because now you're in charge of kind of everybody, not just one team. And so I think that for me, like, I have no issue being in any different type of role. Like, as long as I can impact people, like, that's what I would like to do. And so I think I'm open to pretty much anything. Like, I kind of just take things as they come. And like you said, I believe that everything comes for a reason. And when opportunities present themselves, like, there is a reason behind that. And so I'm a pretty go with the flow type person. If something comes up and it can work out, I'm like, why not? So I think, like, for me, I'm chilling. Like, whatever comes my way, if I can do it, then I'm going to. And so that's where I'm at. And obviously, as you move through life and kind of your, I guess, needs change. Like, if you do have a family, if you do have kids, obviously you probably need something a bit more stable, and those things do play a factor. But ultimately, I mean, the bottom line is you always want to be able to impact those around you. And so for me, that's the driving factor. And then you can do that in a very different number of ways. So
I love that, and yeah, we'll see. It'll be great to see whatever happens. And again, if it doesn't happen, then there might be a divine purpose behind it, or reasoning as to why and where you're going. And you never know what might happen in 6 months, and you might be in a better position for it, or life may play out in a different way. You just never know, and that's the one thing that I love about life, but also hate on the flip side of it as well, because I can't have that control over it and where it is. And so you've got this ultimate goal of coaching in Division 1. You know how you're going to get there. You know what you're going to do to get there. You got this innate self-belief, the confidence, the levels to go with it, obviously the experience now, the academic side, and whilst you might get to that goal, you achieve it, you might have that success which you talk about, and I believe that you will, but whilst you're there and you might achieve that ultimate goal of getting that job, do you think that the ambition will change then to succeed to then another ultimate goal, or will it be, right, I'm happy with what I'm doing now, and no matter whether I drop down a division from this point or move on to, say, coaching a different sport, or maybe out of sports, for example, would that be something which you're considering, whether it's either move up and achieve a different goal, or I'm happy and I don't mind where this goes?
I think that for me, I really believe, and I know it sounds counterintuitive to what I've said so far, but I do really believe you kind of have to enjoy where you're at because life is so unpredictable and things do come and go so quickly. So I really try not, I mean, I've got like a general idea of what I want to do, right? But I try not to think too much about the future or next steps or kind of look backwards. I just try to kind of live where I'm at. So, like, right now, Arkansas State, how can I be the best version of myself that I can be? How can I impact the program and the players the most? And so I think for me, like having that mentality, I've got my goals and I've got things that I want to do, but the reality is like I'm good with where I'm at and I'm always good with where I'm at because I think that in life you've got to figure out how to be content and happy no matter where you are. And so I think that for me, like things may change and dreams may change, but the bottom line is you always have to remember that like there were times that you prayed or hoped or dreamed that you would be where you are now. And so like I know when I very first started coaching high school, I was like, man, it would be really cool to coach college. So then I went to community college and I'm like, man, like I could have sat there and been like, oh, like I don't want to be at a community college. Like I want to be in Division 1 or I want to do this, but I didn't. I was like, man, like I'm so blessed to be able to coach college at 22 years old. Like that's crazy. And so I think just being like, yeah, I may add on to my goals. I may like want to reach higher levels when I get there. But for me, it's more so just kind of being content where you are and then just seeing how things play out and what comes up and going from there, not always focusing on okay, what's next? You know, because if you're always looking for what's next, you can't really be your best for what's happening now. So I think there's like a fine line in like having a goal and having a dream, but then that being the only thing that you're focusing on because you can take steps towards that. Like I can get my master's degree and I can do my coaching education. But the reality is like I'm also doing that just as much for my goal as I am for my current environment, right? So you kind of I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I guess for me it's just like I may have more goals as time goes along, but I also always want to remember that like where I am, like I've been blessed and I'm lucky to be there. So I don't know, you gotta have a balance, I think, but.
Absolutely, and I think it's great for in the back of my mind for any listener. You might have a coach asking themselves what their purpose is, or someone else who isn't a coach that's trying to get into coaching, or may look at that, or just a general listener where they're at in life. Or you might have a coach going, "Oh, where am I going? Why am I doing this for?" And that's maybe sometimes some of the questions I've asked myself: Am I enjoying coaching? Why am I still doing it? Maybe I sacrifice too much. Is it going in the right direction? And so on. And they're questions that every coach is going to pose to themselves at some point. Sport isn't easy. Soccer isn't easy, and it's quite a demanding sport and everything that comes into it. And whilst you have this self-belief, this confidence, these goals, where you're going, this philosophy, this purpose, you got this underlying divine purpose that you're following. Where do you think it all comes from? Do you think it's that something that has always been within? Do you think it's something that's maybe come from your parents? Is it something in terms of your upbringing, your environment, and so on? Where is it just something that comes naturally to you? Do you think?
My dogs are barking.
That's fine.
Okay, I think they're good now. Yeah, so and I think I said this in another podcast that I was on, but every coach, or I mean, every team that I've ever been on, I've always been the leader. I've always been the captain. I've always been somebody that people look up to. And I think that just my personality and the way I've been my entire life, like I just really believe in myself. I really believe, I mean, it all goes back to, right, that higher purpose. Like I really believe that there's a bigger reason and there's a bigger picture. And I think that for me, like I'm somebody that really values, hold on.
No problem.
Sorry, we live on a farm and they're outside farming right now, and my dog does not like that.
That's right.
Oh my gosh. Okay. What was the question? I don't even remember.
So yeah, it's just that innate belief, that confidence, where it comes from, and how that stemmed really. So obviously, you were saying about you always been in those leadership positions, captain, etc.
Yeah, and so pretty much just through that and through having people kind of lean in on me, like I was always the one that kind of had have a plan, or I had to be the one that like believed in myself or believed in us and like encouraged everyone, and kind of like when the team was down, like I was in charge of like bringing it back together. And so I think just having that role, it kind of forces you to be, I hate the word mentally tough, but it does. Like it forces you to kind of be tough and work through things and always have that belief in yourself and in others. And so I think that just being in those roles my whole life, like it's really gained my skills in that realm. And so I think for me, like it comes innately. Obviously, my parents play a role too. They've always been my biggest fans and they've always cheered me on in everything I've done. And so they are very clear on believing in me and my abilities as well. So that always helps. But I think that, you know, I've just been really blessed to kind of have the roles that I've had through life, and they really have shaped me into who I am now. And so for me, it comes from within, it comes from the support, it comes from my experiences, and it all culminates together to kind of give me that sense of purpose and drive and self-belief.
I love that, and I think that's great, and it truly defines who you really are as both a person and a professional. And whilst you have all of that, and everyone's lent on you, and obviously you've enjoyed taking that on and being that leader, and you know naturally evolving it and stepping up into now, you know, being an assistant coach. Now you get the head coach, and the levels that you want to achieve. It's from an innate ability and being young and being in those positions, it's going to lead to maybe what your higher purpose is and your ultimate goal, which just shows what the absolute purpose of you being on the earth and where you've come from is. And when you said being the best or be the best of a person, what is the best of Katie? How does she be the best version of herself?
Oh man, that's a tough question. I mean, there's so many things that I can say, but I think for me, like my the thing that brings me joy the most in life is just serving others. And that's any capacity, as a coach, as a person, as, you know, a kid, like whatever. I always want to serve others as much and as well as I can. And so I think for me, I would say when I'm at my best is when I'm in an environment where I can serve. And I think that coaching really fits into that so well. And I think that's why for me, I love it so much. And I have had the success that I've had because it's who I am. Like I love to be that person that can help and can guide and, you know, people look up to. And so in coaching, like you're all of those things and more. And so I think like for me, I mean, you get the best of me when I can impact you and I can impact kind of, I guess, others. And so, yeah, I mean, coaching is just it's a perfect thing for me, I think. And it really fits into who I am, like at my core. And so that I love it.
And that's great, and I love that absolute moment of joy and what you talked about there. And I think that makes a great quote. That is certainly going to come out of this, and I truly love what that is. And I've just quickly made a note of that so I don't forget what the point that is. And I think that's great in terms of that. And again, you talk about impacting others and how you do that, and also you're going to do that with that you know, purpose, that reasoning, the support, the guidance, what you do day to day. But at the end of the day, say you got 10 years in and you're 34 now, and you wanted to look back on the impact of others, how would you define the impact of others and how you've gone about it?
Oh my God. I'm so sorry. Say that last part again.
It's not a problem.
How would I define what?
So say you're 10 years in, you're 34 years of age now, you've talked about this impact on others, and someone said, right, I just want a summary of all the impact that you've had, how you would look upon it. What would you say would be the impact on others that you'd be happy with and what you've accomplished?
Yeah, so I think a big thing, and I always try to lead with this, and somebody told me this at one point, I've never forgotten it, but they said, when you are coaching, or I'm paraphrasing, but when you are coaching, you should always ask yourself, what do I want my players to remember about me? Do I want them to remember that I was hard on them and I was a jerk and I made them run all the time? Do I want them to remember that I was there for them, that I cared about them? And I think that I really try to keep that in mind and lead with that. When I first started coaching, I was worse about this, and I think this is every coach's story, but sometimes you let the emotions of the game take over. And I think as you get older, and I mean, I'm not super old, but as I've grown in my career, it happens a lot less. And I really can't remember a time that it's happened in recent years anyways, but I really try to always keep in mind that like they are people first and they are players second. And I think that, what do I want them to remember? Because at the end of the day, like it's more than a sport, right? Like we're playing a sport and we love it, but it's more than just, okay, what can you do for me on the field, right? It's helping you become a better human being. It's helping you become ready for your next steps in life. And I think that for me, that's a really driving factor into how I coach. So the impact that I want to have and what I want my players to remember is I want them to remember that, first of all, I cared about them. Like anything that they needed, whether it was soccer, it was not soccer, I was there for them, and I'm the first one that they can come to. And I've had a lot of situations in my past few years where things have happened and I'm the first one that my players call. And that gives me so much pride to be able to say, because it shows that I've done my job well and that they really do know that I'm going to be there and care and trust me. And so I think that for me, I want them to remember that I cared about them, that I loved them, that I would do anything for them. And then I help them, that I help them become a better person. That's really big to me. I want them to remember that I help them become better and I help them learn how to be a better human, how to be a better teammate in life. And that I hope those skills translate into what they do after soccer. And they look back and they're like, oh yeah, like I remember when Coach Kitty told me that, And then the last piece, obviously, is I want them to remember that I was able to help them along their way in soccer as well. So I want them to remember, like, we had success, they got better. If they want to go play in college, like if I'm coaching high school, they want to play in college, like I want to help them get there. And I want them to remember that, like, I was able to help them on that path. So it's twofold. It's as a human, it's as a player. But those are the things for me that if a player can say those things 10 years from now, like I've done my job. And I think that that's where that really has to go into every decision you make, because it's hard sometimes. Sometimes they make you angry and you want to fly off the handle and you want to scream and yell and get irritated, but it's like, that's not the point, right? And so how can we do it in a way that's going to be maybe a bit better or more caring or whatever? And I think that that's where, I don't know, you got to learn, right? You got to grow, and it takes time. I mean, it's not easy, but I think that, those are the things that I would say if a player 10 years from now told me, I would know that I did something right.
I love that. And again, it'll show where you're going to be, what you're going to do, the impact that you can have, how your players remember you, what you can take away. And I think that's great as well. And you've put your money where your mouth is. You've gone in, you've turned around a team, you've supported that, you've been part of that coaching team. And you talk about success that you have had. So what is that success that you have had, and how did you bring that into play?
Yeah, so when I took over the program at the first school I was at, they had not won a game in 4 years. And so basically they had all sophomores and younger, 13 players. They were playing varsity soccer, and we were in a conference that was, I would say, decently strong. And so they had not had any success at all. So I took the program over in May. In our first year, we went 4-7-1, which from the outside looking in might not sound like a lot, but at the time, like, that was huge. I mean, we were able to win some games. We were able to score some goals. The games that we lost, for the most part, they were fairly close, and it really grew interest into the program. And also, none of them were club players either. Like, these were all basketball kids that just played soccer because they're at a small school, and why not? And so we're playing against teams that every player on the team, bench and field, like bench and the first 11, all are club players, right? And so we had an uphill battle, but we went 4-7-1, and the next year we went 10-4-1. And the 4 games that we lost, one was in the playoffs, which everyone loses a game in the playoffs, right? Unless you win the whole thing. And then we lost. Essentially, the other 3 were really close games, and then the one was to the state champions. So ultimately, we had an extremely good year. And so through that, and we grew the program, so we had like 21 players at that point as well. And then I had 2 kids that had started playing club because they loved the sport and they really enjoyed it. And so there were a lot of successful moments within that, like on the field, but then also just them playing on their own, whatever. And then we also won the first trophy for the school ever. We went to a tournament and we won first place. That was huge too, because soccer had never won anything before. So we got our trophy in the trophy case, and it was really successful and it was great. And so doing that, like I said, I was 20 years old, 21, and made it happen. And so then I wound up leaving that year, which the following year I would have argued would have been a better year because we were on the rise. But I left, I went to a different school. And then at that school, we went to the state tournament. We lost in the semifinals to the team that won the whole thing. And then the JUCO I was at, we went to the national tournament, same thing, lost in the semifinals to the team that won the whole thing. And then through my club teams, it was the same way. I took over 2 teams that were really, actually, even before that, 4 teams that were really struggling. And throughout the season, we were able to kind of flip it and really wound up having good years. And my girls and boys went the furthest in the playoffs that they've ever gone. And so it, like I said, I've just had success in terms of, I guess, being able to come in as a head coach on programs that maybe haven't been where they could be and bringing them there. And then as an assistant coach, being able to kind of come in and help, which those programs were already successful, maybe not to that same extreme, but already successful, and being able to kind of help. And then my middle school boys as well, is the same situation. They had won like 2 games the year prior. My first year there, we went all the way to the championship game. We lost in the last 10 seconds on a goal. And then the next year, which was this past year, we won the whole thing. We went completely undefeated, won both championships. And the team that beat us the year prior in the last 10 seconds, we beat them in the last 10 seconds. That was a very full circle moment as well. But yeah, so I had been able to have success, but obviously, I mean, the coach plays a role, but I really credit the players because, I mean, none of it would be possible without them. So a lot of it, like, I don't want to seem like it's all me and I'm the greatest coach ever. Like, no, it's the players, and it's really just creating a culture where they feel cared for and they buy in. And when they buy in, they're going to give 100%. And then when they're giving 100%, they're going to get better, right? And when they get better, they're going to win. So it really, for me, it all comes down to relationships and purpose, and just creating buy-in and having the relationship with the players and making sure that they enjoy it and they have fun. And the wins are kind of a byproduct, but it's not really the point. You know, the point is to make them better and to enjoy it. So we got a little bit of both over here, but yeah, so
it sounds like a full win-win situation, and it was great that you've had those experiences, and as well as being able to go in, impact, make those changes, bring the wins along the way. And everyone loves winning, and that's the point of playing sport at the end of the day. And that's all they want to do: score goals, be the winners, have that joy, and take away the fun elements as part of it. You went into some tough programs because obviously the teams haven't won in a few years. The confidence levels may have been hit. The team might have been managed in different ways. They might have transitioned and so on. And there might be a full factor of internal influences and external that really had a significant impact on the program. And whilst you went in there and maybe you were preparing to go into it, did you define the full-on strategy before going into that position, or was it literally create those buy-ins, build those relationships, and see what happens, and then hopefully have that success as a result?
Yeah, I mean, I think like that was the strategy, right? Like their confidence is shot, the program sucks, they don't enjoy it. So how do you overcome that? How do you fix it? And the reality is, when you're in a losing program, and like you said, I mean, I don't think the point is winning, right? I think the point is becoming a better human, learning life lessons, giving 100%, right? All those things. Winning, like I said, winning is the byproduct of all of that, right? If you do all of that well, you're going to win. You're going to have success. It's going to come, right? But ultimately, our purpose is bigger. And I think that when you go into a program that's struggling, how do you overcome that? Well, nobody likes being on a losing program, right? Like if we're going to lose a ton, we're not going to have fun. So first and foremost, we've got to start enjoying the game, because if you don't enjoy what you're doing, if you don't have fun, you are not going to work hard. Why would you ever work? It's like if I told you you had to go work, I don't know, the worst job you could possibly think of, and I'm like, and you need to do it and have fun, you would look at me like I was freaking nuts. You'd be like, no, I'm not doing that, right? So, or you'd go do it, but you wouldn't be happy about it. And so I think for me, you're going to work harder or the hardest when you enjoy it. So how do we enjoy it? Well, first of all, we create an environment that is fun, right? We compete. We put the players in spaces where they can have success. So maybe we design things in practice in a way that they're going to score or they're going to have success, because it builds that self-efficacy, that belief that, hey, like I can actually score a goal. I can actually make 2 passes in a row without screwing up, right? So putting them in spaces to be able to have success, and then building those relationships and making sure that they know that you believe in them. You are doing anything that you can possibly do to help them be successful. They know the why behind what you're doing. And that's huge, because I think that this is, for me, a really great divide in coaches. I think that some coaches really believe that the players should know the why. USSF really, really pushes that. The players should know the why. You should create buy-in at the beginning of your session. And some coaches really believe that the players should just do what they're being told because they're the coach and they should listen. And I think that for me, when you tell the players the why and they understand the purpose, they work harder because they see the big picture. So for me, everything that we do, it's like, hey, this is what we're going to do and this is why we're doing it. And they understand. And so then they work hard because they get how it translates. And I love, like, I want to say this is a quote I heard, or maybe I made it up, I don't know. But I love the thought of like a coach that hates being questioned is a coach that doesn't know what they're doing, right? Like if I know why I'm doing the things I'm doing, I have a purpose and everything makes sense, you can ask me any question you want, I'm going to explain it to you. And I'm not going to take offense to that, because as a player, you deserve to know, right? You deserve to know why we're doing the things we're doing. And so I think, like I said, the big things and the big points that I'm trying to make are you build the relationships, you make sure that they know why they're doing the things they're doing, which creates buy-in. And as you create buy-in, it makes the relationship stronger, right? So it all goes together. And then when those things happen, they become better for you. They work harder for you, for each other. And when that happens, they become better. And so I think it all starts with the basis of those relationships. And so for me, that's the strategy. You come in, you build the relationships, and everything else will follow later on. So like my first maybe 2 or 3 practices at each of these programs, like we didn't do anything. Hardly anything that if you went out there, you'd be like, what the heck is this girl doing? Like we played dodgeball. We, had water guns out there. We were doing water balloon fights. Like we had nothing to do with soccer. Maybe we had a soccer ball here and there, but everything was fun because it's like, hey, let's build a relationship first, right? Like let's have fun. And so I think, I don't know. I mean, that's just me. That every coach has their own beliefs, their own strategies. But for me, like that's how it all starts.
And I think that's great. And it just interlinks with something which I was reading earlier. So I was reading a journal article, and it was about philosophy and coaching, and whether these coaches and managers go in and instill a philosophy.
I'm so sorry.
No problem.
I'm so sorry. When they're barking, I can't hear you, and I didn't want you to be talking and not be able to hear you. So
that's fine. Ahead. That's no problems. So it was just on a touch of a journal article that I was reading earlier today, and it spoke about whether there was a purpose behind a philosophy. So whether a coach or a manager goes into a club or a situation and instills a philosophy, whether it's actually built on more beliefs, situational and strategy, as well as maybe focus points, it allows them to actually go in and deliver that success. And only then long term are you really developing a sense of philosophy within the club style, rather than going this is my philosophy and this is how I want to do things. And it made quite interesting thinking, because realistically there, without you going in going, right, this is my philosophy, we're going to play this shape, we're going to do that, then I want to do this, you've sort of gone in with a strategy, whereas creating buy-ins, creating that relationship, looking at the person centered, and then as a result you've increased their confidence, you've created that joy, you've looked at what success looks like on and off the field, you've looked at how to improve people, and therefore you've developed a sense of philosophy without going in and going, this is my philosophy, as well as what defining a strategy and a way forward of working with people. So it's really interesting in terms of how that's worked out for you and the way that looks. And whilst you've been coaching for a few years now, you've had success, you've still got a long way to go in coaching, there's still going to be a lot of highs and a lot of lows. What has been maybe the lowest point that you've experienced so far?
Yeah, I do. Really quick before I get to that question, I did want to touch on what you said, but I think that's huge. I think a lot of coaches get stuck on like, this is how I'm going to play. They get to a program and they're like, this is what I do. This is what I coach. And I think that there's a big piece of meeting players where they're at. And I think that a lot of coaches miss that. They come in and they're like, this is what I do, and this is what I coach, and this is the formation I run. And then they forget that you've never seen these players a day in your life. Like, that might not work for them. So for me, like, I go into everything, and this is life in general, but also in coaching, very open-minded. And if you can show me something that works better, then you got it. And I'll give you, like, prime example. This past year, we had to put a new center mid for our middle school boys because our other one left. And I put this kid at center mid in our first preseason scrimmage. He did okay. One of my players came up to me and he's like, Coach Katie, he cannot play center mid. This kid needs to play center mid instead. And I was like, okay, you know what? I didn't even think about that. That's a genius idea. Okay, I put him there in center mid in our next game. He was our leading goal scorer of the year and our MVP. I mean, he was our most impactful player. And it all started with a player telling me, yeah, coach, you got it wrong, right? And I could have just been like, oh, no, like, I know what I'm doing. Let me do my thing, right? But I didn't. I'm like, hey, you know what? That's a great idea. And it all worked out. And at the end of the season, I had this conversation with that player. I said, hey, well, the only reason that we had the success we did this year is because you gave me that idea, right? And so I think that that's where, like, you have to meet players where they are. You have to be open-minded. You have to be willing to kind of work with what you have. And so for me, it's really important to not be set in your ways. And I also think just the way soccer is constantly changing. Soccer is constantly changing. It's constantly evolving. And I think that if you get stuck in one opinion or one mindset, like, you're going to get left behind. And so I think that's a big thing as well. Like, you've always got to be willing to kind of change what you're doing. So that's huge. So then your question was, what was your question? I lost my...
That's fine. But I love what you've gone back to it and really built upon that and reiterated. But what has been the lowest point that you've maybe experienced so far as a coach today?
So I think for me, my lowest point has just been, and I think this is in general, but I think that there's always kids that you just struggle to connect with. And I think that, that's personality, maybe that's parental influence. There's a ton of things that it can be. But there are always kids that, like, maybe they're just not as outgoing, they're not as talkative, and you just struggle to connect with them. And so for me, I'm a big, like, I try to hypothetically, like, touch every shoulder, right? Like, I try to compliment every player throughout a session or, interact with them. And when they come, I try to, hey, how was your day? Like, what's going on? And I think that even though, like, you can try your best to interact with everybody, some people just are not having it. Like, they just don't like you, or they just don't fit with you, or whatever it may be. And I think that's human nature. But I think being a leader, I always feel like that's my job. And when I don't connect with some players, like, it really makes me upset. Like, I really struggle. And so a few years ago, there was a team that I was coaching, and we had a player, and I just could not, for the life of me, connect with her. Like, I would try and try and try, and it just would not work. And I kind of got to a point where I'm like, why can't I, right? Like, what is going on? And so I really, like, felt bad about it, and she wound up quitting the team. And so to me, like, that is still something now that, like, I think about. It, like, eats away at me, because I'm like, why? Like, what was the problem? And I think that it's like, there is that mindset of, like, okay, it is like, we're human, right? Not everyone's going to get along, not everyone's going to be able to connect, but then at the end of the day, it's like, well, that's my job, right? So how do I overcome that? And I think for me, like, when that happened, that was really difficult for me. Like, I had never had a player that didn't enjoy playing for me. I had never had a player that wound up quitting. And they were very vocal about it as well. It wasn't a situation where, like, they didn't say anything and she quit. Like, they were very vocal about how they did not like me. They did not like how I coached. They, did not like me as a person. And they had said things that, like, attacked me as a human being, which that's the other thing. Like, if you dislike someone as a coach or their philosophy, that's one thing. But to kind of, like, go into, like, now you're attacking me as a person, like, that's hard. And especially when coaching is something that, you pour your all into it, right? Like, any coach you talk to, they're going to tell you they give 110%, right? And so when you've got people that attack you even more than coaching, because coaching, it's like, whatever, I know my why, I know why I'm doing what I'm doing, okay, like, I'll tell you. But when they go further and, like, attack you as a person, that can be really difficult. And so for me, that's definitely the lowest point I've ever been at. I was really upset about that for like weeks. I mean, I was talking to my director. I'm like crying on the phone. I'm like, I just don't understand. Like, what, But I don't know. I mean, it's going to happen again. And, you're always going to have that. But I do think that that's difficult. And so I don't know. I would love to have advice from other coaches on how they overcome that, because I don't know, dude. I mean, most coaches I talk to are like, oh, I just like screw them. I don't care. And I'm like, yeah, but I just can't do that. Like I do, So I don't know, but that's definitely been the lowest. And like I said, it won't be the last time, but yeah, it's not fun.
And it's hard because I've been able to have that in teaching and coaching, and you might work with 1,000 pupils, 1,000 players, and it's difficult. You want to connect with as many as possible. You want them to enjoy Katie's session, enjoy Luca's session, and to again look back and say, oh, I really had that impact, or I took that away, or I enjoyed that. And sometimes it's really hard when you plan a great session or a great lesson, or you're really thinking about the players away from coaching. You put your energies into it, you commit your life to it, you give up those life opportunities as well because you're driven to do coaching, and it can be hard when maybe that's vocal, and it can also be hard when you haven't impacted the player or individual the way that you've wanted to, and therefore they haven't really built that connection with you. And whilst part of your philosophy might be to build those relationships with players, it's hard when it really comes away and it doesn't have that outcome, and it can be difficult to sort of manage, to deal with, to take that within our stride, because football and sport and who we are as people whilst delivering it are very emotional and very connected, and as well as very aware of what happens around us. And therefore when we can't get through to someone and can't make that connection, it can be difficult for us to comprehend, then manage, and then move away with.
Yeah, 100%. And that's exactly where I was at. And I mean, like you said, there's so many factors that play into it. Like it's you as a coach, it's your philosophy, it's who you are as a person. And sometimes it just doesn't work. And I mean, that's a reality in life, right? Like you can't make everybody happy, but it still made me extremely upset. And I'm like, but I want to, And I think that goes back to just me being the type of person that like I want to serve others and I want other people to kind of lean in on me. And so when I feel like I'm not doing that, like it sucks. And I don't know how you overcome that. I don't know. I mean, obviously, like I don't stay up at night over it anymore, but I don't know how like you in the moment kind of just are okay with that. And honestly, I don't know if you should be okay with that. I don't know if being okay with that would be a sign that maybe you don't care enough, I don't know. But for me, like you said, it's just everything that I do goes into coaching. So when it's going well, it's great. And like you said, when you hit those low points, it's like you're rethinking, your whole personality, like who you are as a person. You're like, man, what is wrong with me, right? Because it's everything that you do. And so I think that's the great and most difficult thing about coaching is just how much you put in, because yeah, I mean, like you said, it's real. When it's high, it's really high. When it's low, it's really low. And so it can be a really, really difficult profession to kind of move through those things with. But I think that's where you just got to have like your support system and the people that remind you when you're in the lows, like they're not going to last forever. You've been here before, you'll be here again. It's part of it, and you just move on. So, I mean, it's just like coaching, right? Like you tell your players, like it's one loss, you'll be okay, right? So same thing. You just got to get over it, move on, learn from it.
I love that.
Next.
And I think that's great. And sometimes the way we have to sort of admit defeat sometimes to really move forward and know other people can impact them, will impact them, and we have had some impact in some way. And whether it comes down to us to really look at that player development. We've had some impact on it. It might not be hugely significant, but it might be down to someone else to really get through to them or who can connect to them. And whilst that might connect to leadership and connecting us back to that, you shared a great quote from Michael Jordan upon your Twitter the other day, and I really love what this was. And as he says, winning has a price, leadership has a price. I pushed people when they didn't want to be pushed. I challenged people when they didn't want to be challenged, but I never asked them to do something I wasn't willing to do. And that is such a fantastic quote within itself. And while it comes down to those personalities, those leaders, those who want to learn, and those relationships as well as those personalities within your team, do you find it easier to connect with the leaders in your team than those who might not have those leadership qualities, and maybe the players who have a bit more curiosity than those who don't have curiosity, for example?
Yeah, definitely. I think, just me, like my personality being a leader, I connect more with players that are like that. They remind me of me when I was a kid. And I think that's that's like, you'll have coaches that'll say like, oh no, I connect with all my players. That's not true, right? You have a personality, your players have a personality, and some personalities click more than others. And that's the reality of life, right? Like, we have friends for a reason, right? We get along better with some people than not. And I think what your job is as a coach is to make everyone feel like they belong and to make everyone feel like you care. But I mean, people know, like, obviously you don't want to play favorites, and I don't play favorites. I don't, play kids because whatever. But the reality is, like, yeah, I'm going to talk to some kids more and get along with some kids more because that's how they are, right? They're more outgoing, they're more talkative, whatever. And I think that for me, like, going to that quote, I always tell my players, like, I will never ask you to do something that I would not do. So, for example, they're not allowed to be on their phones during practice. I would never go on my phone during practice unless, like, an absolute emergency, right? Like, because I'm not going to say that and then turn around and do it. And there's a lot of coaches that do that. There's a lot of coaches that make these rules, but then they don't follow them. And that's a big culture issue for me. If you are a coach and you're making a standard and you are not leading by example and meeting that standard as a player, I know I would respect you. I don't know what your players think, but I wouldn't. And so I think that, that's huge. And I think, like, that quote really resonates with me because I think leadership has a price. And I do, like, okay, yes, I want everyone to be happy in a general sense. But for everyone to be happy, there are moments where people are unhappy, right? And that's a part of leadership. If you are leading properly, everyone should not be happy. Leadership is holding people accountable. Leadership is calling people out when they don't want to be called out. Leadership is punishing people when they're not following or meeting the standard. And I think that's where, like, when you're a leader, there's going to be moments where they're not happy. But when you have the relationship with them, they can see the big picture. Like, oh, I hate Coach Katie right now. She's really irritating me. She made me run because I cut corners, right? But then when they take, a few minutes or maybe a couple of days, right, they realize, okay, well, Coach Katie's only doing this because she cares and she wants the best out of me and she cares about me as a person, as a player, whatever. And so it's like, I think when you build the relationships, it becomes easier to lead because accountability becomes easier because it's accountability out of love and not out of, being a jerk. And the players know that. And for me, like, that's the biggest difference. And so leadership, like, it does come at a price. It does come at making people mad sometimes. It does come at having difficult conversations. But I'm not asking you to do things that I'm not going to do. And I'm not asking you to do things because I hate you and, I want you to hate your life. Like, I'm asking you to do these things so that we can be better as a team for each other, so that we can have success, which is fun, right? Which does make it more enjoyable. And so I think, like I said, just being open about that and that why and that purpose, like, the players see it. And you might, I've had this conversation with coaches where they've been like, yeah, middle schoolers, like, they don't see that. And they do. Like, you might not think so, but they do. And if they didn't, they wouldn't keep showing up and putting in 110%. You know what I mean? Like, they get it. So they might get a little irritated, but they get it. And it's the same thing, like, you tell a toddler not to touch the oven, right? They're going to be mad. They're going to throw a tantrum. When they turn maybe 6, they realize, oh my God, I can't touch the oven because, it's going to burn my hand. Same thing. That's what leadership is, right? So I think I love that quote. And it was really good. And I really just think that, like I said, dude, I mean, it's all about just setting the standard, being the leader, being that person. And then those kids that are leaders, like, yeah, I connect with them a lot easier because they have those qualities. But it's also equally important to me that the kids that don't, that I help grow those attributes as well. And I think that's where, when I connect with the leaders and I grow the leaders, then they lead by example within the team, which then makes everyone else stronger. So it all goes hand in hand. It's like a science, like, it's like an art and a science mixed together, and then maybe just some dumb luck in the middle. I don't know.
Well, that's the definition of leadership by Coach Katie, and I think it's a fantastic one. And you yourself are going to have a quote that might rival Michael Jordan. And whilst you are a leader, you've created that buying with players, and you've got this MJ Pearlesque personality about you, and you've created that relationship. You have these standards and you have this accountability. How do you address that with your players, and how do you instill those standards and accountability elements?
So for me, before we start the season, before we touch the field, like, we have a meeting and I lay out every single rule and standard that we have on this team. And it is meeting the players where they're at So for example, my high school kids or like college, they're in charge of getting themselves to practice. Like you need to be there early, 15 minutes, or you're late, you get in trouble. My middle school kids, and actually had this conversation on Twitter the other day where there was a coach saying that he had some middle schoolers, and if they didn't show up on time, they weren't allowed to come to practice. And for me, like, that's crazy, right? Because it's like, and I told him that, I'm like, that's a little crazy because middle schoolers, they can't control their ride. So my middle schoolers, they basically, if they're running late, they're not in charge, so that's fine, but they need to have all their stuff on. And when they get there, they need to jog to the field. So if they are there late and they walk to the field, they know that they're going to run. Sometimes they'll walk, and then when I look at them, they'll start running, and I'm like, nope, saw you walking, sorry. But, it's meeting the players where they're at. But we make those standards very clear from day one. This is the standard. And I also tell them, this is the punishment. Like, and different things have different punishments. So, like, just an example that I can think of, like, if they don't show up to practice, or if they're late and they don't jog to the field, or, like, the ones that are in charge of their own ride, if they don't show up on time, then they run. That's their punishment. But for stuff like, bullying a teammate, whatever, like, you lose playing time automatically. So basically, we have the standards, we have the punishments, and they're laid out from day one. And not only do I have that conversation with the players, I also show the parents. So everybody is on the same page, like, these are the standards. These are not questionable. And this is what we want. And then we talk about the why. We have these standards because we want to build an environment where everyone feels X, Y, Z, right? And so I think that when you lay that out, everybody knows this is what's happening. And if you don't, this is the punishment. And then I think the biggest part of that is accountability. So lay it out, but then you actually have to follow through, right? How many coaches, they say something and they say, oh, you're going to get punished, whatever, and then they don't do it. So the players are like, whatever, we don't care. We're not going to actually get in trouble. Or how many stories do you hear of the best player on the team does something and all of a sudden the punishment doesn't exist anymore, right? And so I think that's where the accountability, like, it's for everybody. And this is the punishment, it, because we talked about it already. So go ahead, like, this is what you're doing. And so I think just making those standards clear. And if you make the standards clear and the punishment's clear, like, that's on them. And at that point, if they can't meet that, like, that's your fault because I told you, And so I think that, just being clear from the beginning, having the accountability throughout. And I'll say, like, in my experience, and I'm going to knock on some wood because I hope that I'm not jinxing myself. But in my experience, when I have done that, I have issues maybe for the first week. They don't happen anymore because they know, like, I'm not playing around. You know what I mean? Like, they do it and they get punished and they're like, oh crap, like, Coach Kitty's being serious. Like, yeah. So, if you hold accountability on the front end, like, it's easier to start off. I forget, there's some other thing, but somebody told me, like, it's easier to start off, like, hard on them and then to kind of, like, loosen the reins as you go than the other way around. Like, you set the standard, the tone, then they're going to start doing it on their own, and then you can kind of have more fun with them, so to speak. So that's how I do it. And I typically don't have problems after about a week because they don't want to get in trouble. And they know that, like, hey, I'm not playing with you,
And I think that's great, and I think you've touched upon a great point there, and a key consideration in terms of any leadership or any terms of management, and that can be cross-referenced towards any teams and culture that you could create. And whilst you do that, again, that sort of gives us that round reflection back to that buy-in and whether we can impact every player, because you might have players or parents and families at that point who will go, right, this is not for us, we want to move on, and therefore you're sort of streamlining your squad, and you'll get those buy-ins from those who want to remain and stay. And sometimes we lose players and it's difficult to deal with, and we're like, oh right, I wanted to impact them and it's a shame we've lost them. But at the end of the day, if they've made that choice to go and they can't have that buy-in, they might realise the grass isn't always greener, but they might realise that they should have stayed, or they've decided to move on, and it's just the fact that we have to accept they've decided to move on. These are my standards and principles, and this is what I'm like as a coach, and I shouldn't have to change that because a couple of players are upset. And as much as it's difficult for us to deal with, sometimes that's just something that has to happen.
Yeah, and I think that that's big. Like, for me, I think that there are people, you just cannot make them happy, and that's the reality. And I think that when you say on the very front end, like, these are my standards, this is what we're doing, and everyone's on the same page, if you don't want to be a part of that, like, from the beginning. You cannot come to me 6 months after the season started and be like, we didn't know that this is how it was going to be. You can't, because you did, because I told you from day one, right? And so, like, I have that conversation, like, I'm not, and I coached middle school and up. I've never coached younger. And in those environments, I don't believe in equal playing time. And that's my personal opinion. Some people may argue, but that's where I'm at. So from day one, I tell all my players and all my kids the same meeting, or parents and kids, there will not be equal playing time. If you disagree with that, don't play for me. Period. End of story. You know. Then you've got, on occasion, a parent comes 6 months later. Well, we just thought that this was going to be, equal playing time. Well, I told you 6 months ago, it's not, right? So it's like, you can't possibly, say that you don't know what's going on if everyone's on the same page. And I think that's the biggest thing for me. Like, this is how I am as a coach. This is what I believe in. Like, the formations and the style of play, all of that's like TBD, right? Because we're going to meet you where you're at. We're going to help you we're going to work through what works best for our team. But the standards, the rules, the things like that, like, that's not changing, because that's who I am as a person, right? And so my biggest thing is I want to build them as people first. So, like, yeah, I want you to become a better player, but you need to become a better human being first, because one, it's going to make you a better player. And two, when soccer ends, what are you going to do, right? Like, are you going to be a successful member of society because you gain these skills, or are you going to go and be an idiot, right? And so, and the reality is, and it's very sad, I talked about this with someone the other day, but there are kids that you would love to impact, but their parents may not want or understand what's best for them long term. And you as a coach, like, for example, a kid gets in trouble for, I'll just use an example this past year. Kid on my team says something racist. So on our standards, you lose a full game of playing time if you do it once. If you do it twice, you're done. Like, there's no, there's one chance because you're a middle school boy, okay? I'll give you one chance, but not anymore. So player says it. I sit the player down and have the conversation with the parents and the player as well. And the parents get super irritated, it's a joke, whatever. I'm like, hey, these are our standards. And I'm doing this because if he were in a workplace, he's done. He would already be fired, right? And I'm like, so this is something he needs to learn in life. This goes beyond soccer, right? So him losing one game of playing time is worth him potentially saving, being canceled, being fired from a job, whatever, later, because he doesn't learn the lesson. And, these parents disagree, and they make it very clear they disagree. And when they go home, they're sharing that same thought with the kid, like, oh, Coach Katie's an idiot, whatever. So then you sit there and you're like, does the kid even learn the lesson, right? And so I think that's where, like, sometimes we as coaches want more from the kids than even their own parents do. And look, parents are blinded by love. They're blinded by, oh, my baby's the best kid on earth. They never do anything, But I think that that's a difficult piece of coaching as well, because I want more for them. And it's hard, like you said, when you lose those players because that's the reality. It's not the kids, right? The kids know where they're at. The kids know where they're at on the order of players and talent and skill and playing time. They know. It's the parents that can't accept that. And I think that when you lose kids because of the parents, it's like you are putting your child in a more difficult situation long term. You're teaching them to run away from things that are difficult, to just jump ship and find somewhere that works. You're not teaching them to work hard and put in the effort and whatever. And I mean, it is what it is. You can't really do much about it, but I mean, obviously it sucks. So I think that for me, that's one of the biggest things I hate about coaching, especially youth, because it's just like, it breaks your heart. Cause like, I know your kid's going to benefit way more from being here with this, but I mean, you do you, I guess, but it sucks. And I think, I don't know, dude, I hate that part for sure.
And it's hard, and sometimes it comes back down to that personal philosophical approach in life that we have, and trying to find what we're doing and whether that actually makes us happier and whatnot. And you've led us down such a great episode and topic here today, and what I've already chosen the title of The Higher Purpose for this episode, because it's ended up being such a great conversation. It's talked about so much around who you are, how you work with people, and the way that they work as well, and what you'd like to achieve, what you'd like to do, where you're going in life, how you're going to do it, and actually that higher purpose of who you are, where you're at, and where you're going. And whilst you spend a lot of time maybe reflecting and looking upon that, we've had this discussion, and you're thinking about your players, you're thinking about your sessions, you're thinking about those relationships. realistically, what does reflection mean to Coach Katie?
Reflection means asking yourself, how could I have done that better? And that's it. I mean, how could I have impacted that one player? How could I have run that session? How could I have designed that activity better? You know, how can I be the best version of myself every day for every individual player? And that's it. I mean, that's the thing that I constantly ask myself. And I think reflection's big. I think reflection is how you learn. And without it, like, you're never going to get better. And so, yeah, I mean, those are my questions. So
I love that, and I think that's great in terms of that reflection. And another quote to certainly build upon this reflection, mind mapping, and what it is. And it's been great to talk to you, Coach Katie, and I'm glad that we could rearrange and get this connected. And it's been absolutely fab to listen to you, and especially with someone who has a balance of so much going on, and really has that energy and commitment, and reminds me of where I was at 24, in just terms of these energies and how I had that outlook. And it's great to see it within your eyes and where you want to go and have that ultimate goal. And I wish you every success in terms of what you're doing. But before you go, I'm going to throw some quick fire questions at you.
Okay.
So, if you had to have someone describe you in 3 words, what 3 words would they be?
Selfless, intentional. I'm going to say funny, because I think I'm hilarious.
I love that. If you could move to any country to coach, where would it be?
Ooh, that's a good one. I've got to say Germany. Got to say it.
And say you didn't get to the Division 1 job, but a job in Germany came up. Would that take away going to Germany, or would it take away from being a Division 1 coach?
Like, if I had to pick one?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'd rather be a Division 1 coach.
There we are then.
At that point.
Your true purpose has been defined within this. If you could spend a day with any coach or manager, who would it be?
Anson. Gotta be.
Love that. If you could manage any player, who would it be?
Mallory Swanson.
Another strong
Love
one.
her. I hate that she won't be at the World Cup. Absolutely love her.
Definitely a shame. Who was or is your role model?
My role model in terms of coaching is definitely, I've got a couple. All right, so I'm going to say Colton Bryant, which somehow his name always comes up in everything I do. But he's just really, really helped me in a lot of ways. And we share a lot of similar philosophies. So he's my role model. And then my other role model would be Marguerite, just because she's a younger female coach and the success that she's had. And she's one that, like, I feel like her name comes up as well, just because I really respect both of them a lot. I talk about them a lot, and they both probably think that I'm, like, I don't know, stalking them. I don't know. But yeah, no, 2 great people. So those are the 2 I'm going to say.
Strong choices, very strong choices, and hopefully one of them will be on the podcast in the future. So it'd be great to have that real life role model on it as well. And in the future, someone might be saying Coach Katie. You never know.
I hope so. That would be awesome. I think I said that on something else I was on. I was like, it would be so cool, like, to see a couple of years from now, like, somebody saying all this about me.
I think so. I can see where it's going. To be a full-time professional player at any sport that you wanted to be, or a full-time professional coach?
Ooh. I've got to say, I don't know, that's hard. I'm actually going to say coach.
Yeah, strong. Again, yeah. Defining that purpose, look.
I really, I love playing, but I know, so much more now about the sport, and I love it and appreciate it so much more now as a coach than I ever did as a player. So that's the reason I'm going to say coach. Because I just don't think, even if I was a professional player, I don't think I ever would have gained, the same, the same mindset.
Again, strong choice and a great answer. If you had to choose, or if you had the choice of any job out there in terms of sport or management coaching, what job would it be?
I don't know if I want to answer this, because what if the coach there is okay, actually, you know what? I'll just say this. I would love to be the coach at LSU, because I think that school has everything going for it. And my dad is from there. So that's gonna be. But Sean, I'm not coming. I love you. I'm not coming for your girl. I'm sorry. I had to say it. I hope she does not watch this.
Coming for you, yeah. What is your biggest pet peeve?
Like in life, or
Could be both. Could be life. Could be within coaching.
my biggest pet peeve. Ooh. Okay, my biggest pet peeve, just in general. So I'm not originally from the South, but I moved here. But it's like the way that the way that Southern people talk, or like some of the words they use. Like it just drives me insane. And like they know this. Like all my players, like I make fun of them all the time. But yeah, that drives me crazy. And then, which is ironic because now I'm moving to Arkansas, so I'm sure their accents are probably even thicker there. And then my biggest pet peeve in coaching is when you tell the players, like, hey, pick up the cones. And either they leave like 3 cones on the field, or nobody wants to pick them up, or you're like, put the cones on the little loop thing, and they all just look at you like you're stupid. And it's like, okay, I came out here like 30 minutes early, set all this stuff up, like whatever. The least you could do is pick them up. Or especially when they pick them up, and then you show up the next day for practice and there's like 5 on the field and you're like, okay, thanks guys, like whatever. I really hate that. Also, another pet peeve is just how bad the pennies smell, because I'm really bad about remembering to wash them. And then my whole car smells like it. And see, my players, like they complain because they always tell me I never wash the pennies and that I'm like abusing them. And I'm like, okay, well, you have to deal with that smell for like 2 hours. But me, every time I drive my car, it smells like that all day. So I promise it's not because I want you to smell that way. But yeah.
I love that, especially about the cones as well. One of my most dreaded ones is when you use like dome cones and they kick it over and they just run off and just leave it. And I'm like, even for another coach delivering a session, I'm like, just turn the cone over and have it back in its place because it's looking messy out here.
Yeah, and like I use colors like for practice so we can transition more easily. So like our first thing may be green and then our next thing's red. So I'm like, all right, pick up the green cones. And I like sometimes, and it normally happens towards the beginning of the season and then they kind of get the hang of it and it's fine. But somebody starts picking up the red cones and I'm like, oh my, like put them back down. I said green. Those are not green. Are you colorblind? I don't know. But yeah, that really drives me crazy too, because it's like the whole point is so that this is super quick. And then you wind up making us take forever because now I have to go set them down again. And that drives me crazy too. You could not possibly make it easier for them. And they still do not listen.
One of my biggest things is just not listening or taking things on board, especially when you work in a school. It's just, what is your most favourite thing to do in your downtime?
Travel. I love to travel. I've been to 17 countries. I'm going to 2 more. I'm going to the World Cup. So I'm trying to get 30 countries before I turn 30. So we'll be at 19 at the end of this summer.
Very strong efforts. That's amazing. What are your non-negotiables?
In a player?
In a player, yeah.
Non-negotiables. Okay. You have to be willing to listen, willing to grow. So, you can ask questions and ask why, but when I explain why, like, you've got to be willing to take that in. So I guess just being coachable is really what that comes down to. Non-negotiables really just, you can't be, this, I guess, should go without saying, but for me, like racism, homophobia, stuff like that, if you do it, like I said, once, okay, I'll give you a second chance, I guess. But twice, I'm like, no, like I'll kick someone off the team. Really, other than that, like that's it. As long as you're coachable, you're willing to listen, and like you're not a horrible human being, like we'll be fine. We'll figure it out.
Strong efforts, and I love those non-negotiables. And to wrap up on, what is one thing you enjoy most about coaching? And you might have already answered this.
Yeah, just impacting the players. I love seeing them become better people. I love when I go to the store and a player of mine, Coach Katie, comes up and gives me a hug. And when my players that I haven't coached in 4 years send me like, hey, we have a game this weekend at Micros, like, can you come watch? And just like the long lasting impact and relationships that you have. And they still, come to you years later, months later. And like this past season, one of my middle school boys that played for me 2 years ago went to high school, and he came back and was my assistant coach this year. And so just the impact, right? Like the relationships and being able to watch them become, young adults and go through life. And like my first group of seniors when I was 20 years old. So now they're 22, which is funny because it's like, we're almost the same age, but they've now graduated college, some of them. And it's like just being able to see them kind of grow and become better. And, you hope that like you played a role in that. And so for me, like that's the best part. I love it.
I love that, and I think that wraps up such a wonderful episode, and such a great time speaking to you, and really finding about who you are. Without I've done my background. I listened to some of the other episodes, but it's been great to actually truly feel who you are through around what we've discussed, and that higher purpose, which has defined such a great episode. And taking time out your day, especially when you've got a master's study and you've taken on a lot of classes, you're coaching, and you actually have some assignments. I think it is truly wonderful and really appreciated. And I wish you the best of luck in terms of those assignments, and the best of luck in life as well, and hopefully you achieve everything, which I'm definitely sure you will, and I hope to be cheering you on along the way as well. But it's a big thank you from me, and I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you having me, and yeah, it's been a good conversation for sure.
Definitely. Well, thank you very much, and talk soon.
Yep, sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks, bye.